I thought the breakup was bad. Then I accidentally cursed my ex-boyfriend. Not just any ex, the Dark Lord of the Shadowlands. Yeah, the whole brooding, cape-wearing, I'll rule the world type. Except now, every time he tries to be evil, he sneezes. Like, violently. And guess what? He showed up at my door, mid-sneeze fit, demanding I fix it. Spoiler, I can't because I don't even remember casting the curse. There may have been alcohol involved, and a potted plant. Now we're stuck on a chaotic quest together, trying to break the curse before he sneezes himself into oblivion, or worse, before we catch feelings all over again. Magic? Check. Bad decisions? Double check. Romantic tension I did not sign up for? Triple check. Trust me, you don't want to miss this disaster. Hit play to watch the chaos unfold. Please like and subscribe. Chapter 1. The Hangover Hex. There are few things in this world that terrify me. Sentient laundry piles? Been there. An over-caffeinated pixie swarm? Survived that. Accidentally setting the mayor's wig on fire during the winter solstice festival? Technically, alleged. But nothing, and I mean nothing, strikes fear into the heart of Seris Blackthorn quite like waking up with a magical hangover. Picture this, sunlight stabbing through my crooked tower window like it has a personal vendetta, my head pounding like a drunken dwarf's drum solo, and the faint scent of burnt toast, even though I definitely didn't make toast. Mostly because the last time I used the toaster, it tried to bite me. I groaned, rolled over, and immediately regretted both decisions. My entire room was a crime scene of poor life choices. Half-melted candles, empty coffee mugs stacked like precarious monuments to my bad habits, and my spellbook, the grimoire of questionable decisions, lying open on a page ominously titled, "Curses You'll Definitely Regret Tomorrow." Well, that can't be good. I squinted at the magical residue lingering in the air, faint streaks of purple and green fizzing like leftover party confetti, only more ominous. Also, my houseplant was now moving. Great, that's the third time this month. Before I could piece together what went wrong, or whether I needed to apologize to anyone, I heard frantic knocking at my door, followed by a sneeze, a loud, echoing, soul-shattering sneeze that rattled the window panes and knocked a mug off my desk. Crash. I sighed, hauling myself out of bed. If that's the Grim Reaper, tell him he's early. Instead, I opened the door to find something arguably worse. Kaelen Duskbane, tall, dark, brooding, and currently mid-sneeze. Achoo! Magic sparked uncontrollably around him, turning a perfectly innocent pigeon perched on my windowsill into a puff of glitter. A very confused puff of glitter. Seris, Kaelen growled between gritted teeth, voice dripping with the kind of disdain usually reserved for exes and tax collectors. Fix this. I blinked. Fix what? Your personality, he glared. The curse, Seris. Another sneeze. This one charred the edges of my doormat. The one you put on me. Behind him, a small figure snorted with laughter. Twig, Kaelen's goblin henchman, who'd been loyal to him for years, but had the subtlety of a drunk raccoon. He was holding a small notebook titled Kaelen and Seris Betting Pool, Kiss or Kill, with odds scribbled in the margins. I rubbed my temples. Look, Kaelen, I've cursed a lot of people. You're going to have to be more specific. His eye twitched. I sneeze every time I try to do anything remotely evil. That's a curse? For me, yes. I squinted. Did this start after the breakup? His nostrils flared. Yes. That tracks. Apparently my post-breakup coping mechanism had involved drinking too much enchanted wine and casting experimental curses. Honestly, not the worst thing I've done while drunk. That title belongs to the time I accidentally enchanted a street lamp to serenade passers-by with tragic ballads. It's still at it. Well, I said cheerfully, good news. Curses like this are usually temporary. How temporary? I shrugged. A few days, a few weeks, maybe a decade. Hard to say. Achoo. A blast of dark magic ricocheted off my ceiling, leaving a scorch mark in the vague shape of my own face. Rude. Twig was practically vibrating with excitement now. I've got 10 gold on They Kiss by Chapter 3. Kaelen glared at me with the smoldering intensity of someone who's plotting either murder or marriage. Maybe both. You're coming with me, he snapped. I arched a brow. Oh, am I? Yes. Your magical aura is tied to the curse. He crossed his arms, looking smug despite the fact that his next sneeze blew a hole in my favorite tapestry. You'll help me break it, or else. I snorted. Or else what? You'll sneeze me to death? Twig jotted something in his notebook. New bet. Death by sneezing. And just like that, I found myself roped into an impromptu road trip with my brooding ex-boyfriend, his snarky goblin sidekick, and the world's worst hangover. This was fine. Totally fine. Probably. Chapter 2: Reluctant Alliances and Other Bad Ideas. In hindsight, I should have slammed the door in Kaelen's face, maybe tossed a potion at him for good measure, preferably one labeled "Warning, may cause spontaneous tap dancing." But no. Instead, I let myself get dragged into the world's worst road trip because apparently, I'm cursed too, cursed with poor decision-making skills. The problem with traveling alongside your brooding, dark-robed, accidentally sneezing ex-boyfriend is that there's no dignified way to pretend you don't know him, especially when every time he tries to look intimidating, he lets out a sneeze that causes minor property damage. Case in point, the village of Hollowmere. Population: a handful of terrified villagers, 2 goats, and 1 very unlucky haystack that had the misfortune of standing too close when Kaelen sneezed, and poof, instant spontaneous combustion. I sipped my coffee, completely unbothered, as Kaelen glared at the smoldering pile. "This is your fault," he hissed. "Well, technically it's your immune system's fault," I said, slurping loudly. "But sure, blame the witch." Twig trotted beside us, flipping through his ever-growing betting notebook. "Odds are shifting. 50 to 1, says Seris, snaps and turns Kaelen into a decorative lamp. "Make it 30 to 1, I muttered, "and I'll consider it." Following close behind was Commander Vera Holt, Kaelen's terrifyingly competent right-hand woman. She was all sharp angles, perfectly polished armor, and the perpetual expression of someone who regretted every life choice that had led her to this exact moment. I respected that. Vera finally spoke after hours of strained silence, her voice like cold steel. "Why didn't you just kill her, my lord?" Kaelen opened his mouth, achoo, and a nearby tree lost half its branches. I sipped my coffee again. "Yeah, Kaelen, why didn't you kill me?" He scowled. "Because unlike you, I don't make impulsive, reckless decisions." "Really?" I arched a brow. "You once tried to summon an army of shadow wolves using nothing but a cursed spoon and bad intentions. It was a strategic experiment. It bit you in the ass. Literally." Twig snorted so hard he nearly tripped over his own feet. New entry. Biting wolves incident. Odds Kaelen brings it up out of spite. 10 to 1. We traveled for days, weaving through enchanted forests, over cursed bridges, and past towns where Kaelen's reputation as the Dark Lord preceded him. Not that it helped. Every time he tried to menace someone, he'd sneeze and accidentally enchant a chicken to speak fluent sarcasm, or turn a well into a literal bottomless pit. Our dynamic quickly fell into a pattern. 1. Kaelen broods. 2. I make snarky comments. 3. He sneezes. 4. Something explodes. Rinse and repeat. By day 4, I was ready to strangle him with his own dramatic cloak. We made camp one night near the ruins of an old watchtower, the sky painted with streaks of violet and gold. I sat cross-legged by the fire, nursing my coffee, like it owed me money, while Vera sharpened her sword with the intensity of someone imagining it was my face. Kaelen paced, looking like a man who'd lost both his kingdom and his last shred of patience. "We need to reach the ether cradle before the next full moon," he muttered, probably to sound important. I yawned. "Why? Planning to sneeze on it dramatically?" His glare could have curdled milk. "The curse is tied to my magic. If we reach the ether cradle, we can sever the connection." Twig raised a hand. "Betting pool update. Odd Seris makes a sever the connection joke in 3, 2. I didn't disappoint. "Wow, Kaelen, if only we'd thought of severing the connection during our relationship. Might have saved you some sneezes." Twig fist pumped. "Pay up, Vera." Vera muttered something unkind under her breath and flicked a coin at him. Kaelen, to his credit, didn't respond. He just clenched his jaw, turned his back to us, and stared into the distance like he was contemplating the tragic poetry of existence, or possibly trying not to sneeze on the campfire. Later that night, when the others were asleep, or pretending to be, I found myself staring at the flickering flames, my coffee long gone, my thoughts annoyingly present. Why did he still get under my skin? Why did I care? I snuck a glance at him, Kaelen, sitting against a tree, arms crossed, moonlight painting silver streaks in his dark hair. He wasn't glaring. For once, he just looked tired. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the only one cursed. Chapter 3. Flashbacks, Feelings, and Other Unwanted Visitors. If there's one universal truth in life, it's this. Nothing good ever happens after dark in an ancient, cursed forest. The trees in the Varnwood Hollow stretched tall and thin, their twisted branches clawing at the sky like they were trying to escape the ground they grew from. A faint mist slithered between the roots, carrying whispers that weren't caused by the wind. The perfect setting for either a magical epiphany or a tragic death. Naturally, I was rooting for neither. We'd been traveling for days, with Kaelen growing more sneezy and irritable by the hour. The two were definitely connected. Twig's betting pool was thriving. Vera's patience was not. And me? I was mostly just annoyed that we'd run out of coffee. Are we lost? I asked for the third time that hour, picking my way over a gnarled tree root. Kaelen didn't bother looking back. No, because it feels like we're lost. We're following the map. I glanced at the crumpled parchment he was holding upside down. Hella. Right. Solid strategy. He growled under his breath, flipping the map with unnecessary force. Twig, trailing behind us? Scribbled something gleefully in his notebook. Odds Kaelen admits we're lost. 20-1, Twig muttered. Vera sighed, probably reconsidering every life choice that had led her here. As it turned out, we were lost. But that was the least of our problems, because the forest had plans of its own. We stumbled into a clearing just as the mist thickened, curling around us like cold fingers. The air shifted, heavy, electric, charged with the kind of magic that doesn't play nicely with others. Kaelen's hand went to the hilt of his sword. Vera drew hers without hesitation. Twig tucked his notebook away like a responsible adult, which was honestly more alarming than the creepy mist. Then, the shadows moved. Figures emerged, tall, robed, their faces hidden beneath hoods. Their voices echoed like distant thunder, speaking in unison. The heart remembers what the mind forgets. Great, I muttered. Cultists. Or worse, poets. Before Kaelen could unleash his signature glare sneeze combo, the ground beneath us pulsed with magic. I felt it wrap around my chest, tight and suffocating. Then, snap, the world shifted. Suddenly, I wasn't in the clearing anymore. I was standing in Kaelen's old study, dimly lit, shelves overflowing with dusty tomes, the faint scent of ink and storm magic lingering in the air. But this wasn't now. This was a memory. Our memory. There I was, past me, arguing with past Kaelen, waving a cursed potted plant like it was a weapon. If you think controlling people with fear is leadership, then congratulations. You're officially the world's most brooding tyrant. Past me snapped. Oh please. Past Kaelen shot back, arms crossed, his jaw clenched in that annoyingly attractive way. At least I don't set things on fire when I'm emotional. As if on cue, the plant burst into flames. Present me groaned. This memory? Really? I turned, and there he was, present Kaelen, standing beside me, equally horrified. Why is my hair like that? He blurted. That's what you're focusing on? I snapped. He ignored me, squinting at his past self. It's too dramatic. Look at the volume. What was I doing? Summoning demons or auditioning for a tragic villain role? Despite myself, I laughed, which made him look at me, really look at me. The tension between us crackled, thick as the magic still pulsing around us. Then, snap, the memory shattered, and we were back in the clearing. I was panting, heart racing, my emotions dangerously close to the surface. Kaelen stared at me, eyes dark and unreadable. That memory wasn't real, he muttered, like saying it out loud would make it true. Sure, I said, voice tight, because feelings aren't real, right? Before he could respond, Vera shoved between us. Enough. We need to move. Right, moving, focusing, anything but that. We trudged through the forest in strained silence, the echoes of our past clinging to us like shadows. Later, when we made camp, Kaelen sat across the fire from me, staring into the flames. His usual sneer was gone, replaced by something softer, something dangerous. I hated that I recognized it. I hated even more that part of me wanted to reach for it. But feelings? Feelings were messy, dangerous, like magic. So instead, I muttered, your hair wasn't that bad. His lips twitched, just slightly. You set a plant on fire. Yeah, well, it had it coming. Chapter 4, Betrayals, Breakdowns, and a lot of sneezing. There's a specific kind of tension that settles over a group after they've been forced to relive their most embarrassing, emotionally compromised memories. You know, the kind of tension where no one makes eye contact. Sarcasm is used as an emotional defense mechanism. Hi, it's me. And the only sound breaking the silence is the occasional soul-shattering sneeze from your cursed ex-boyfriend. Achoo! Kaelen's latest sneeze sent a small burst of dark magic ricocheting off a tree, turning a perfectly innocent squirrel into a mildly annoyed hedgehog. The squirrel, hedgehog now, technically, gave us a long judgmental stare before waddling away, probably to file a complaint with the Forest Union of Cursed Victims. I sipped my rapidly cooling coffee, glaring into the distance. If this keeps up, we're going to run out of small woodland creatures. Kaelen glared at me, his usual scowl slightly dampened by the redness around his nose. Maybe if someone hadn't cursed me. Whoa, here we go again, I groaned. You'd think the Dark Lord of Veridon could handle a little nasal inconvenience. Twig perked up from where he was scribbling furiously in his betting notebook. Odds of Seris finally snapping and shoving Kaelen into a swamp. 5-1. Any takers? Vera didn't even flinch. Put me down for 10 gold. Eventually we arrived at the ruins of the Ether Cradle, an ancient relic of magic that, according to Kaelen, was the key to unraveling the curse. According to me, it looked like an overgrown rock with commitment issues. The ruins sprawled across a jagged cliffside, half swallowed by time and vines, glowing faintly with residual magic. The air felt thick here, like it remembered things you'd rather forget. Fitting. Kaelen approached the central altar, a cracked stone pedestal etched with runes that pulsed faintly under his touch. He closed his eyes, trying to summon his magic. I watched, arms crossed, fighting the petty urge to say something snarky like, "Don't sneeze on the ancient artifact." But then, his magic actually started to work. For about 3 seconds. Achoo! A blast of chaotic energy exploded outward, flinging us all backward like magical bowling pins. I landed in an ungraceful heap, coughing dust and pride. When the dust settled, Kaelen was on his knees, clutching his chest, his face twisted in genuine pain. Panic, sharp and unwelcome, stabbed through me. I scrambled to my feet and rushed to his side, shaking him. Kaelen! Hey! Broody McSneezeface, don't you dare! His hand shot out, gripping mine. His eyes burned with something raw and unguarded. The curse, it's tied to my heart, he gasped. Little. Metaphorical. Both. I don't know. Of course it was. Because my life is a poorly written melodrama. Before I could process any of that, Vera stepped forward, her face unnervingly blank. She reached into her cloak and pulled out a small, dark crystal, and then she stabbed it into the pedestal. A surge of magic erupted, dark and pulsing, wrapping around Kaelen like chains. His body convulsed, his magic flickering erratically. Vera, what are you doing? I screamed, grabbing her arm. She didn't flinch. I'm making him a better ruler. The betrayal hit like a punch to the gut. Kaelen tried to fight it, his magic straining against the enchantment, but every time he got close to breaking free, achoo, the chains tightened. Twig, for once, looked horrified. This wasn't in the betting pool. Rage flooded through me, hot and reckless and sharp. Without thinking, I threw myself at Vera, tackling her to the ground. We rolled across the stone floor, trading blows and insults. She had better aim, I had better hair. Eventually, I managed to wrench the crystal from her grip and hurl it off the cliff. The dark magic snapped like brittle glass. Kaelen collapsed, gasping for breath, his magic flickering weakly around him. I stumbled to his side, my chest heaving. Kaelen. Hey, look at me. His eyes fluttered open, darker than usual, shadowed with something that wasn't just exhaustion. I'm fine, he rasped. You're an idiot. I snapped, brushing hair out of his face with a hand that definitely wasn't trembling. We sat there for a beat, the aftermath settling over us like dust. Then he muttered, "You hit Vera pretty hard. She deserved it." A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Later, after we'd tied Vera up, using surprisingly efficient knots, courtesy of Twig, I sat by the dying fire, my heart still racing. Kaelen sat beside me, his shoulder brushing mine, warm and real, and entirely too distracting. After a long silence, he said quietly, "You saved me." I shrugged, trying to sound casual. "Well, yeah, you still owe me rent for all those books you stole after the breakup." He huffed a soft laugh. And for one fragile, dangerous moment, I didn't hate him. Chapter 5. Unexpected Alliances and Other Terrible Life Choices. If you've ever woken up after an emotional crisis, a magical brawl, and the near death of your cursed ex-boyfriend, you'll know there's nothing quite as humbling as realizing you drooled a little in your sleep. Unfortunately, I woke up with my face half squished against a rock, hair in wild disarray, and Kaelen sitting way too close, brooding like it was his full-time job. Which, to be fair, it sort of was. "Morning," he muttered without looking at me, because of course he'd pretend that nothing happened. Not the magical heart chains incident, not the betrayal, and definitely not the part where I'd practically cradled his head in my lap like some tragic romance heroine. I wiped my mouth discreetly. "Did you watch me sleep?" Kaelen blinked, finally glancing over. "No, I was just," he waved vaguely at the fire. "Brooding." "Wah, yes, very convincing." I yawned and stretched, ignoring the way his gaze briefly flicked to my exposed collarbone before he snapped his head away, as if physically allergic to vulnerability. "Achoo." His sneeze ignited the remnants of our campfire, sending Twig, who'd been asleep under a blanket of questionable cleanliness, flying backward with a startled yelp. Twig rolled over, groaning. I had 5 gold on Kaelen, making it till noon without a sneeze. Guess I owe myself money. After Vera's betrayal, things were tense. And by tense, I mean Kaelen's brooding levels had reached new heights. Vera was tied to a tree, still managing to look annoyingly dignified, and Twig kept whispering, "Plot twist," every 10 minutes like it was his catchphrase. We had questions, mostly. 1. Why did Vera betray us? 2. Who taught her those knots? Because, despite being tied up, she still managed to look like she was in control. 3. Why was my magic acting weird every time Kaelen was within arm's reach? Spoiler, I didn't like the answer to that last one. While Kaelen sulked, strategically planned our next move, I decided to clear my head, which for me, meant wandering off into the woods, caffeinated beverage in hand, and pretending I wasn't emotionally compromised. That's when I met King Alderon. Yes, that Alderon, ruler of Solara, wearer of unnecessarily dramatic capes, and the human embodiment of oops, did I start a war? He wasn't hard to spot, mostly because he rode into the clearing on a horse so shiny it probably had its own skincare routine, flanked by guards in armor polished within an inch of its life. I squinted at him over my coffee. Let me guess, you're here to kidnap me, use me as leverage, and generally make poor decisions. King Alderon beamed like I'd complimented him. Indeed, I'd love to say I heroically fought them off, but in reality, I was too undercaffeinated to deal with royal nonsense. So yes, I got captured. They dragged me to Alderon's temporary war camp, which was less strategic military base and more overcompensating with tents. As Alderon paced, dramatically monologuing about his plans to defeat Kaelen, blah blah blah, I noticed something odd. Some of his guards didn't look like regular soldiers. They were too tense, their loyalty too performative. And then it hit me. They weren't just soldiers. They were part of Kaelen's army. Rogue faction. Before I could escape or finish my coffee, chaos erupted. Magic exploded across the camp, black tendrils of shadow mixed with golden light. In the middle of the chaos, Kaelen, sneezing, but also fighting. It was almost impressive, really. He'd swing his sword, unleash dark magic, sneeze mid-act, and somehow still look like he was winning. I couldn't help it. I laughed. Right there, in the middle of the magical battlefield, shackled, and surrounded by traitorous soldiers. Kaelen's eyes met mine through the smoke, sharp and furious and worried. He carved a path toward me, cutting down anyone in his way. By the time he reached me, I was grinning. Took you long enough, Dark Lord. He glared, slicing through my shackles with one swift motion. Next time, don't get captured. Next time, don't sneeze on the battlefield. We fought back to back, our magic intertwining like it had a mind of its own. Every time his dark energy surged, mine flared with wild, chaotic light. And it worked. Too well. Our combined magic was unpredictable. Explosions of power that sent enemies flying, reshaped the battlefield, and accidentally turned one of Alderon's tents into a very confused goat. During a brief lull, Kaelen grabbed my arm, pulling me close. His face was flushed, not from battle, but from something else. Seris, he rasped, Achoo. The blast of magic knocked us both off our feet, sending us tumbling into a heap of tangled limbs and unresolved feelings. We didn't get up immediately, partly because I couldn't feel my left leg, mostly because his face was inches from mine, his breath warm against my cheek. My heart raced. His hand tightened on my waist. I swallowed. If you sneeze on me again, I'm turning you into a decorative lamp. He didn't sneeze. He kissed me. And just like that, the curse broke. Chapter 6. Big battles, bigger feelings, and the plot twist no one bet on. There's nothing quite like kissing your cursed, brooding ex-boyfriend in the middle of a battlefield to really put things into perspective. For one glorious, fleeting moment, everything was perfect, his lips warm against mine, the chaotic magic crackling around us like fireworks. And then, boom! The tent-turned goat exploded, literally. Not because of the kiss, though I like to think it contributed, but because King Alderon had apparently decided that if you can't win the battle, just set everything on fire and hope for the best. Classic Alderon. Kaelen and I jolted apart, both breathless though probably for different reasons. You broke the curse, he whispered, his dark eyes searching mine like he couldn't quite believe it. I opened my mouth to respond with something snarky. Guess I'm just magical like that, but before the words could escape, Alderon charged at us, wielding a sword that was way too shiny to be practical. Kaelen groaned, standing up, and dusting himself off like Alderon was an annoying errand he'd forgotten to run. Do you want to handle this? He asked. Or should I? Whoa, no, I said, summoning a ball of chaotic, crackling energy. I've got this. The next few minutes were a blur of magic, shouting, and Alderon dramatically tripping over his own cape. Kaelen fought with elegant precision, every move calculated, deadly, and just a little theatrical. I refused to admit how attractive that was. I, on the other hand, fought like a caffeinated tornado, wild, unpredictable, and powered by equal parts adrenaline and unresolved romantic tension. Somewhere in the chaos, Twig appeared out of literally nowhere, notebook in hand. Odds of you two surviving without creating more emotional damage, 10 to 1. Who's in? I launched a spell over his head, narrowly missing Alderon, but hitting a rogue soldier square in the chest. The soldier turned into a chicken. Twig didn't even flinch, adjusting the odds. Eventually, we cornered Alderon near the ruins of his own war tent. Well, what used to be his war tent before it exploded. Kaelen pinned him with a glare that could melt steel. Surrender. Alderon puffed up his chest. Never. I sighed and flicked my fingers. A small burst of chaotic magic hit Alderon square in the face. His mustache turned pink. A pause. Alderon looked genuinely horrified. I surrender. We tied him up with the same impressive knots we'd used on Vera, thank you very much, and regrouped. Kaelen sat beside me, his usual brooding mask slightly cracked. So, I said after a long silence, we broke the curse. Seems that way. And you're not sneezing anymore. Nope. Which means, I trailed off, raising an eyebrow. Kaelen met my gaze, his expression softening in a way that made my chest ache. Which means I can be as evil as I want. I snorted. Sure. Because making me coffee and rescuing me are peak villain activities. His lips twitched. I could still take over the world. I leaned in, close enough to feel his breath. Then why haven't you? Kaelen didn't answer. He didn't have to. Just when I thought things couldn't get weirder, plot twist number 3 hit us like a rogue spell. Twig cleared his throat, holding up his notebook like it was sacred scripture. So, funny story. We all turned to him. I may have slightly manipulated events for the sake of the betting pool. Silence. Kaelen blinked slowly. What? Twig grinned. Oh yeah. The curse? Totally bet on how long it'd take you two to break it. The rogue faction? Double odds if they betrayed you, and caused emotional growth. Vera? Triple points for dramatic betrayal. I stared at him, stunned. You're telling me all of this chaos was because of your stupid betting pool? Twig's grin widened. And I won. I'd love to say I reacted with grace and dignity. Instead, I tackled him. Kaelen didn't stop me. In fact, I'm pretty sure he cheered. With Alderon defeated, the rogue faction disbanded, and Twig's betting pool officially bankrupt, thanks to me accidentally setting his notebook on fire, life settled into something resembling normalcy. Kaelen decided ruling the Shadowlands wasn't as fulfilling as he'd thought, especially without the whole evil sneezing curse thing to spice things up. So, naturally, we opened a cafe. Brew and Hexes became an accidental headquarters for a new, chaotic resistance movement. Apparently, caffeine and rebellion pair well. Twig became the manager, because irony. Kaelen still tries to give intimidating villain speeches, but every time he does, he spills coffee on himself. And every time, I laugh until I cry, because love is messy, like magic, and I wouldn't have it any other way. The end. If you were cursed to sneeze every time you felt emotionally vulnerable, what's the most inconvenient situation you'd find yourself in? Let me know in the comments. I need a good laugh.